Hey there, this is Renessa Lane, and welcome to another conversation around creating your perfect work. If you know me, you know that I am all about how to discover, design, and get highly paid to do work that you love, whether that be radically changing your career, starting a business, or bringing a big idea to life. So today, I am super excited to be sharing the platform with an amazing guest, Austin Belcak. Okay, so Austin teaches people how to leverage unconventional strategies to land jobs they love without connections, without traditional experience, and without applying online. So he is the founder of Cultivated Culture. And his work has been featured everywhere that you can imagine, Business Insider, Fast Company, all of that. And it's born out of an incredible story of his own that I won't kind of steal the thunder of. Well, actually, yeah, I will steal the thunder of. So, so Austin was a recent grad in biology, and he graduated with a 2.5 GPA. And was able to move forward and create strategies and systems to be able to land job offers at places like Google and tell me where else, Google,
Microsoft and Twitter.
Microsoft, Twitter. And I know that there are folks that are listening on the line, the overachievers in us that are like, what? And so we're certainly going to have Austin on the line really telling us how to do that. And there are folks who've gone, over 100,000 folks who've come through his community. And they've been able to land jobs at places like Amazon and Facebook and Twitter and all the places that people really want to work and those kinds of things. And so I'm delighted that he's here to really share how do you do that, right? Like how do you? Because the biggest issue, especially when we are stepping out and doing something radically different in our career, or we're stepping into entrepreneurship, places where we may not have experience or we may not have connections. How the hell do we do that? so Austin's going to be here and he's going to share those tips and those tools. And my encouragement to you, get your pen and paper handy because he's going to drop some gems. And I am delighted to be a part of this conversation and to be able to learn from him and also just give him a platform to be able to share and build you up as you think about what your next steps are. So welcome, Austin. We're glad to have you here. Thank you for being a part of our audience today.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Renessa. I really appreciate it. And now I have a very, very high bar to live up to. So thank you for the generous intro. No, I appreciate it.
Everything I said, I mean. And so I'm looking forward to pitching and catching with you. And I think the obvious question, at least for me, is, as speakers and all of that, we're often reminded that there's a message in our mess. Right? So you go through something, you screw it up, you overcome, and then that becomes something that you can teach other people. But this was certainly the case for you. And so can we just open up with you sharing your story? Like, how did you end up doing this work? How has it worked for you? So that folks have the lay of the land of just who we're talking to.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we have to rewind back to high school to get the full context here. But for me, I went to a boarding school in New Jersey. And so I guess the point there is that we didn't get out too much. We were really, really focused on academics and studying and all that good stuff. And a big question that we all get asked when we're coming up in our education is, what do you eventually want to do? What do you want to do when you grow up? And for me, that answer was becoming a doctor. And I found that out about sophomore, junior year of high school. I took some biology classes. I was really interested in it. And so I set my sights on achieving that goal. I went and interned at medical centers during high school, during the summer. And then when I was applying to college, I basically tailored my whole search to finding a school that would allow me to jump into the pre-med track, but was still feasible for me to get into and would check off some other boxes that I was interested in. So I ended up going to Wake Forest in North Carolina, and they had a great pre-med program. And I started there and I was super excited. I was ready to achieve my dreams of becoming a doctor. Yep. And so I show up and it's our first week on campus. It's orientation week. And I walk out of my dorm with a few of the friends that I made on my hall. And this car pulls up and this guy rolls down the window and he's like, "Hey, do you guys want to go to a party?" And my mom's voice popped in my head and she's like, "Now, Austin, you're going to college. Yeah, don't talk to strangers. Don't get in weird cars." And I was like, nope, we're going to go get a piece of pizza and we're going to have a blast. We're going to have a killer night. So they drive off and another car pulls up and the same thing happens. And it turns out this is how this is how the social scene works at Wake. You jump in a car and they take you to a party and you go have fun. So eventually we broke down, we hopped in a car, we went to a party, we had a good time. This is something that I'd never experienced before. And so my grades suffered accordingly. I ended up failing, chemistry.
That explains it.
That explains it. That was the trick. And I hid it from my parents for a while, but eventually the secret came out. But so instead of studying, I was doing that. I immediately failed chemistry my freshman year. I also failed French my spring semester of my freshman year. I think I came out of freshman year with like a 19 GPA, just below a 2. And I was sort of faced with a decision. I could try to drag my grades back up to an acceptable level that some med school would take a chance on, because there was no way I was getting that 4.0 anymore. Or I could just continue living that life of having fun and exploring new things. And so I kind of took the latter. I took the path of least resistance throughout the next 4 years. And fast forward to junior year, I got an internship that was kind of placed in my lap from my roommate's dad. He worked as a physician, as a doctor, and he found this job in medical device sales at a company for me to intern at. So I did that, and they offered me a job at the end of the summer, and I accepted it on the spot. So I went through senior year. I didn't interview anywhere else. I didn't apply to a single other job. I just accepted this offer because it meant that I could defer, real life and having to worry about it. So fast forward to graduation, and I leave school. I enter this job, and I realize that I'm making about $35,000, $40,000 a year. I'm making about half of what my friends are making in finance or consulting or these other fields. I didn't factor in cost of living. I went to live in Charlotte, North Carolina. My car payment, my rent, insurance, all that was chewing up about 70% of my total income. And on top of that, I hated my job. I was getting up at like 2:30, 3 a.m. To be at a hospital by 5 a.m. to prepare for surgeries. I was kind of covering surgeries all over the state as a backup rep. And my boss treated me like crap. And so I realized, I had to get out of that situation. And everybody tells us, hey, you spend all this money on a degree, you can get an opportunity anywhere. You can get your foot in the door anywhere. That's why these degrees are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so I thought, great, I'll put together my resume and I'll apply. And I set my sights on tech. I said, here I am. I graduated from college. I'm a recent grad with a 2.58 GPA at my graduation date, 3 months of professional experience. And I'm like, I want to work at Google or Microsoft or Facebook or whatever. And so I started applying to those companies, and I don't think they've sent a rejection letter faster in their company's history. And then I started ramping it back. I applied to mid-tier startups and early stage, and then just any company that had tech somewhere on their website. And nobody took a chance on me. I ended up sending out about 300 applications in the first 3 months or so. And I ramped that up eventually to 500, 600 plus over the course of my job search. And for those first 300 applications, I didn't get a bite. I didn't get a single interview. The only interviews I got were these pity interviews from family friends, where inevitably they were like, well, you're a really nice kid, we like you, but we have candidates with real experience, so we're going to have to go with them. And that was really demoralizing. So eventually, to kind of make a long story short, I went and I got coffee with a Wake Forest alum who worked at Uber. And he kind of gave me this piece of advice that really resonated with me, which was to only take advice from people who already have what you want. And I kind of realized that I was taking advice from people that we always go to for advice, right? Friends, family, career counselors, Google, the internet. And I realized that while, my parents had been successful in their own right, or my friends in finance had been successful in their own right, none of them had done what I was trying to do, right? None of them had come out of school with this bad GPA and a degree in biology and a job in healthcare, and they were trying to make the jump into tech. And so I had to go find people who did. And I basically made it my mission to kind of tear apart the hiring process and learn from these people. I wrote out my 4 criteria for my dream job, which was to be working in a major city like New York or LA, to be working at like a Google or Microsoft, a leading tech company, to be making 6 figures annually, and to be doing it all before I was 26, because I didn't want to wait till I was like 40 for all this to come to fruition. So I went and I used LinkedIn, and I found all these people who met that criteria, and I went and talked to them, and I basically discovered 2 major things. The first was that every single one of them had gotten a referral into the company that they worked at. So they found somebody, whether they knew them before or not, they built a relationship with them and got a referral. And the next was they found these unconventional creative ways to illustrate their value, because they felt like their value wasn't being recognized in a resume, in a cover letter. And
Mm-hmm.
so they stepped outside of the box there. And so I took those two learnings and I basically used them to create my own job search system. And so eventually I started sending in far fewer applications. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, the three companies we mentioned earlier, where I ended up getting offers, Google, Microsoft, and Twitter, I didn't apply online to any of them. I got them all through referrals, through people that I hadn't known before. When I started my job search, I had built the relationships from scratch. And then I used what I call a value validation project, which we can talk about in more detail. But essentially, I stepped outside the resume to kind of showcase my value. I created like a pitch deck for myself and what I brought to the table and my ideas to kind of show, hey, I can do this stuff if you give me a chance, but here's what I'm capable of. Here's what I bring to the table. And then eventually I got this job at Microsoft. I've been here for 4 years now. And a lot of people asked me when I started, how weren't you the guy with the bad GPA who never studied in college? How the heck did you end up here? So I wrote this giant post called How to Get a Job Anywhere with No Connections. And it really took off. And that was kind of the start of Cultivated Culture. So that's been going on for 3 years now. I started Cultivated Culture in 2016 and the rest is history. And here we are today.
And here we are.
Yeah.
The story is awesome for many different reasons. One, if you applied 300 places, 300 applications, like that's perseverance. Like the vast majority of us, because I speak to candidates that are looking for work all the time, or trying to transition, and 12 rejections, and it's like, woe be unto me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 300 definitely shows how persevering you can be. And fortunately, you recognize that something needed to shift, which is a great thing. But I think out of everything that you said, taking advice from people who have what you want is really, really critical.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to obviously taking advice from people who don't have what you want, which is what the vast majority of us do, oftentimes. And so even for folks who are listening in on this call, they span the spectrum in terms of age and experience. And I'm 44, so I'm on that Gen Xer track, and there's a lot of women on this call that are also in that space, and they're looking at someone who is younger, who is probably a lot more energetic and vibrant and doing things that may be outside of their comfort zone. But the reality is the conventional strategies that we've been taught to leverage, they don't work. They may work to get you a job, or they may work to get you a good paying job. But if you're at the place where you're trying to create perfect work, where you're trying to create the work that you feel like you were born to do, with the lifestyle that's important to you, or whatever your values happen to be, it's time to really think differently about that. And so many of the things that you're going to share in our conversation are critical. And for some of us, it's going to take us outside of our comfort zone on what we have to do. It's going to take us outside of our belief system on what we think is possible. But he's got what we want. He is living proof about that. And taking time out of that day to be able to share that thought leadership with us, that's pretty cool. So I think of all the things that you said, that was the thing that for me hit home the most. But it's interesting because everywhere we turn, we hear about the importance of leveraging our network, right? And so, there's various studies out there, but generally 70 to 80% of roles are filled by somebody who was recommended into that role or recommended into that company. Mm-hmm. But you say that you can land a job without those connections. And that's music to most people's ears, especially if they're introverted and, some of those kinds of things. So tell us more about that, because that's unconventional wisdom and something that most of us are not taught to believe.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to touch on the point that you made. I think a lot of people look at me, and so I'm 28, going to be 29 in March, and a lot of people who are kind of mid-career and not super happy, they look at me and they say, well, like you said, you're young, you're energetic, you don't have kids and you have the time. And I totally understand that. I work with people all the time who are mid-career and looking to change. And the great part about the strategy is that it's really, really effective if you're willing to kind of invest in it. And we'll talk through exactly what that looks like. But when I think about, the life that I want to have. So first of all, I work to live, which a lot of us, I'm sure you feel the same way. But for me, it's really about designing a life that I'm happy about. So my wife's mom is somebody that both my wife and I really look up to, because she really designed her career around the lifestyle that she wanted. So she didn't want to commute to work because she wanted to be able to get to her kid's soccer game or whatever quickly. She wanted to be able to get home. And she basically designed her career and her life around that. And she changed careers to actually become a doctor in her 30s. And so she started late, and she was sort of like a mid-career changer. But I work with people all the time. And what I have to say is, rather than saying, I don't have the time, or I don't have the energy, or I'm too far in my career, I really encourage people to think about, how their life would change if they did invest the time, because this can happen fairly quickly if you know what to do. And by fairly quickly, I mean, we're talking months, like 3 to 5 to 6 to a year maybe, but investing that year now to make your life better for the next 30, 40, 50, however many years, to me, that's great ROI. And it may be hard now, but it's going to be worth it in the end. So that's what I would say first to kind of emphasize your point. And then when we talk about getting a job without having connections, so what I really mean when I say that is I basically teach people how to get a job without having the connections at the company just yet. So like you said, the data shows 40 to 80% of roles out there are filled via referral. And a lot of that comes from these jobs being announced internally before they're posted online. And so there's internal candidates, internal employees who are applying for it. They're referring people in, and those tend to be the strongest applicants statistically, according to the data that's out there. And so by the time the role is posted, these people usually know who they want to hire. And so if you want to get in the door, you have to be one of those people. But the way that you do that is by building relationships with those decision makers. So to kind of dive into the first phase, there's sort of two phases to the strategy here. The first is identifying people who have the ability to impact your, have the ability to influence your ability to get hired. A lot of abilities there. But essentially what I mean by that is targeting the person who can be in the room where the hiring decision is made and say, yes, Renessa is our person. I've spoken with her. I know the value she brings to the table. We have a lot of great candidates. She is the one for this role. And the reason, so I don't recommend reaching out to recruiters or people in HR. And the reason for that is because, one, they're bombarded. They're kind of inundated with emails from people saying, here's my resume, help me get a job. But on top of that, they can refer you in, but after that, their influence kind of ends, and they can't advocate for you throughout the rest of the process. Whereas if you go find somebody who would be your manager if you got hired, or your peer or colleague sitting next to you, that person can not only refer you in, but they can be in that room where the hiring decision is made and kind of singing your praises, which is a huge advantage. But the great news for us is that if we sort of take a step back and say, okay, I want a job at this company. I don't know anybody there, so I need to go build a relationship with somebody. We sort of start with a blank canvas, and we can pick and choose who we build relationships with. So I think one of the things, networking is kind of a dirty word these days. And I think that the reason people hate it so much is because nobody's taught how to do it well. And also people feel like they're forced into an environment that's not comfortable. I hear all the time that, networking is transactional and it's kind of fake. And when you're told to go to a meetup or a career fair and like shake hands and give out business cards, of course that's super fake. But if you pick like one or two people who could really, really make an impact on the goal that you have, whether it's getting your career or even starting a business, and you say, you know what, I'm going to invest in learning as much as I can about this person and their needs and what they care about, and then I'm going to add value and I'm going to build a relationship with them. That's one-to-one. It's intimate. It's really the same way that you would sort of start a friendship. And so when we start thinking about it like that, we open the doors. And so what I recommend people do to kind of kick things off is first come up with a list of 10 to 15 companies. The system is really effective. It's not super scalable. Like we can't spread this out across 100 companies the same way we could just hit apply online to 100 companies. So dialing it down to 10 to 15 is our starting point. And that can be whatever criteria is important to you. And then at that point, we go to LinkedIn and we basically create a pipeline of contacts. And so I'm a salesperson at Microsoft, and Microsoft comes to me and they say, hey, you need to sell, X dollars of Microsoft products, or, it's not great. So I need to figure out a plan to get to that dollar amount. And the same thing works with job searching. So if we start with the offer and we work our way back and we sort of assign success rates to every step in the process, we can work our way back to a number that will give us a really, really good chance of getting the results we want. So backing it out from, let's say you want 2 job offers and your success rate from final round to job offers 33%. that means we need 6 final round interviews. And if your success rate from first round to final round is also 33%, we now need 18 first round interviews. But we're getting those through referrals. You know, not everybody we talk to is going to refer us in. So maybe we need to have, let's say, 40 conversations to get those 18 referrals. But not everybody we email is going to get back to us, right? So we need to send more than just 40 emails. So typically the number that I land on that I've seen really, really good success rates with the people that I've worked with is around 100 to 150 people total, which sounds daunting. But if we put it in the context of the 10 to 15 companies, it's not so bad. It's really just 10 people at each of the companies that we chose, maybe 15 people on the upper end if you want to reach out to a few more. So it's pretty manageable. And the way that we find them, we go to LinkedIn and I just do a search for the job title I'm going after, the company where I want to work. And then I always add in the geography or the location if I know that a role is posted in a certain place, because that just ups my chances of getting in touch with somebody who's on that actual team. And then I run that search, and basically LinkedIn, that those results are going to be a list of leads. Those are all people who, like we said, are already doing what we want to do. And I'm going to click into their profiles. I'm going to look through their history. I'm going to try to find something I can latch onto. Maybe they came from a non-traditional background. Maybe they're working on a really cool product. Maybe they are active on LinkedIn, or maybe they have a personal blog. Anything that I can use to sort of reach out to them and make the outreach about them, I'm going to try to latch onto that. And then once I find my 10 or 15 of those people, I'm going to drop them into my contact tracker. And so that's how I sort of set up my pipeline. And I like to do that before I do any outreach, because as soon as we press send on an email, the ball is no longer in our court. So the more we can do on our side that's in our control, the better. Because when somebody does reply and they say, yep, I'd love to get coffee with you, I'd love to jump on the phone with you, then you can put 100% of your attention to that conversation instead of worrying about, hey, I still have to go research these people and find more emails and whatever it is. So building out that contact tracker is a really, really big part of the puzzle. And then the next piece is reaching out. So I personally recommend using email versus any other medium. Some people try to reach out via LinkedIn. Email is just ubiquitous. We all still use it. And we can also get a lot more insight into what's going on the back end. So if we want to do that, we have to find people's emails. So I recommend a tool called MailScoop. It's mailscoop.io. And essentially you plug in the person's first name and last name, and you plug in their company's URL. So it could be, Larry Page and then google.com, and it'll spit out their corporate email address. Then on top of that, I recommend a tool called Yesware. And Yesware is basically an email tracker that lets you see who's opened your email, when they've opened it, and how often they've opened it, which is creepy, but it's really, really helpful because you can see what's going on the other side. There's nothing worse than being a job seeker and pressing send and then not hearing back for a couple of days and being like, what is happening on the other end? Like, why aren't they replying? So we get a little bit of insight there. And then finally, the biggest thing when you start to send these emails is making the outreach about the other person. I think a lot of job seekers, the big mistake I see is they use what I call a me mindset in their outreach. So they say, hey, Renessa, I see you work here. Here's my resume. Could you pass it along to anybody that, might want to read it? Or, hey, Renessa, I saw you worked at this company. I want to work there. Can you help me get a job there?
Exactly. You're dead in the water.
Yeah, you're emailing a total stranger who has no idea who you are, and you're making a massive ask of them. So instead, what we want to do is build up the other person. We want to go, again, find that angle we can use. Hey, Austin, I saw that you were in medical device sales, but now you work at Microsoft. How did you make that transition? How did you break into tech from a non-traditional background? That's really impressive. I'd love to learn more. Or, hey, Renessa, I saw that you used to work full time, but now you own your own business. And, I'd love to learn more about your journey and how you built it up and ask you a few questions. Focusing on the other person, showing that you did a little bit of research about them, that's going to skyrocket your response rates versus just blasting out your resume to all these different people. And then at that point, it becomes a numbers game. So I just recommend starting with 1 email a day and ramping up to 3 to 5 emails a day. If you do that, you're gonna kind of work your way through that list of 100 to 150 people pretty quickly, but you're gonna pace it out nicely so you can kind of learn what's happening on the other side. You can reflect back on the emails you send, the conversations you have, and that's really how you're going to improve over time. And then your open rates, your response rates, and also your referral rates, the number of people that refer you in, are just going to increase as you reflect and get better.
Yeah, I love first of all, thank you for just literally laying out the strategy. Like, I'm one of those people, tell me what the recipe is, and then I will go and follow the recipe, right? So he's really literally laid it out down to the, here's the email software that you use. Like, I really appreciate the spirit of generosity there.
For sure.
But, not but, the other piece of this is, I appreciate that you have acknowledged that this takes work. It's not complicated. So it's simple, but it's not easy, right? And so simple and easy are two very different things. And so oftentimes, folks can get discouraged because we can see the result, or, we can have a guru talking to us and they're like, oh, I did X, Y, and Z, or I went from a 2.5 GPA to working at Microsoft. And it can sound like it was just a pie in the sky kind of walk in the park. It took work. And so but the challenge is, most of us don't realize going in how much work it actually takes. And it's not hard work, but it is consistent work, right? And so if I know on the front end that it's going to take 100 to 150 people for me to outreach just to find who I'm, the folks that I'm looking for, it changes the mentality around what's too much, right? And so, and we're less liable to quit 3 feet from gold, if you've heard that analogy. And so that's the piece that I was like, that's the number that I needed to hear. Like, how many folks do I need to reach out to for this thing to even be viable? And so now it gives perspective, right? It's doable, but here's what it's really going to take on the front end. And I appreciate you being really transparent about that, because I think that's where a lot of people slip up, and you get really fired up that first week, and then it's not looking so pretty,
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I'd say there too is, I think the toughest part of this is where the accountability ends up with this new strategy, because I think it's really, really easy for job seekers to fall into the trap of saying, I submitted my 10 applications today and the companies aren't responding to me, therefore the process is broken and the companies are broken and it's their fault. I've done what I'm supposed to do. All these career experts say, tweak your resume, apply online. I've done all that. Like, I'm good. It's their fault. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you say, okay, I'm going to reach out to 5 people every day, but I'm going to keep reaching out until somebody gets back to me and until somebody refers me in, and I'm not going to stop until that happens. Mm-hmm. Now you can't blame it on other people. You can't blame it on the system. The only thing, the accountability stops with you. And so if you're not sending emails, if you're not putting the work in, it's not going to happen. Yeah. And something I see a lot, which I'm glad you mentioned, is, people will say, hey, I tried your strategy and it didn't work. And I'm like, well, how many people did you email? And they're like 6. I'm like, okay, well, there's the problem. So that's why I always like to mention the 100 to 150. But yes, it definitely takes work. It's not easy. I think anything worth doing in the world, requires a little bit of effort. And I personally look at that as a positive, because whoever's watching this, you're sitting there and I mean, there's hundreds of other people watching this, maybe thousands, and there's obviously thousands of other job seekers. The fact that they're not going to be willing to put in the work is a huge advantage for you, because if you are willing to put in the work and send those emails, literally you're just showing up every day and you're sending emails. You don't have to do anything crazy, because everybody else is going to give up after that first week, like you said, Renessa. But if you can persist and just stay consistent, that's really going to be the biggest difference between you and landing this job and everybody else who's, going to keep spinning their wheels. Yeah.
The other piece of this that is a little outside of the strategy part of it, and I think can sometimes, people might think it's a little woo-woo, but I'm a firm believer that the thing that you're seeking is seeking you. Like, there's a reason why you're interested in the role that you're interested in. So even as we're sitting, we're 2 folks in our own right who I think are doing great things in the world and helping people, but I have 0 interest in being at Microsoft, like 0, right? And that's because that's not the wall that I'm meant to build. That's not the place that I'm supposed to add value in the marketplace. And so the role that is going to open up for you is really and truly going to be perfect for you, because there's a reason why you should be in that role. You put me in that role, I'm going to underperform all day long, because that's not where I belong. And so it's not good for me. It's not good for the company. It's not good for the customers. Like, it's just wrong all the way around, right? And so oftentimes we can get really, really afraid about, will we get an opportunity? Can we do? And I just believe that the right opportunity for you is looking for you as much as you are looking for it. And so once you know the strategy, then you know what you're accountable for. You're not necessarily accountable for whether or not somebody responds to you. That's not your business. You're accountable for, did you send the email? Did you do the reach out? Did you do the research? Like, that's all that you're responsible for. And so I'm always encouraging folks, mind your own business. And that's the only piece that you're responsible for. And the other piece is kind of take care of themselves over time. Something that I before we even get deeper into strategy, I'm curious about, how do you deal with, because I think for a lot of folks, there's this fear of, I'm bothering folks, they're not going to want to help me, they don't know me, why would someone want to give an informational interview? Because to be fair, there are folks who, when they get that request for informational interview, they're like, this is just a veiled attempt to figure out how to do the job, right? So how do you deal with that belief system around that? Because I think for a lot of people, that could be a sticking point.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll say two things here. The first is that one, it really depends on how you reach out. So we kind of talked about this with the me mindset, but at the end of the day, the way that you're going to build strong relationships is through adding value. And so I think Gary Vaynerchuk has this, he has this book, Jab, 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 Right Hook. And that's what a lot of people quote. I personally call it give, 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 ask, because I think that's a little more relatable. But if you can focus on, instead of emailing somebody and saying, how can I get this person to give me a job? Instead, if you say, how can I add value to this person? How can I learn enough to be valuable to this person? If you shift your mindset and then really follow through on those actions, that is what's going to make the difference. It's kind of like going to the bar and trying to find a date. We've all been in the situation where you're at the bar and somebody comes up to you and they're like, talking all about themselves, right? What job they have, how much money they make, blah, blah, blah. And we all, I think we can all agree that those conversations, you just want to go home and like pass out and just not deal with it. But if somebody comes up to you, I think we can all remember a person who's really made you feel like you're the only person in the room. They're asking you about what you do. They seem genuinely interested and they're offering ways to help and ideas. And that's the kind of person that you want to be. You want to be this person who shows up in a positive way, who's adding value, who's not necessarily asking for stuff right off the bat.
But you are asking right off the bat, right? You're asking for that initial conversation.
Totally. You're asking for the conversation, but you're asking you're basically positioning yourself as, hey, person I'm reaching out to, you have done this amazing thing. You're an expert. You're somebody I look up to. I would very much like to learn from you, and not learn from you in the sense of like, I want to learn what you did so I can get your job, but just open-ended. I want to learn from you because I respect you and what you're doing and I'm impressed by you. If that's the way that you approach it, or if you can find a way to just add value right off the bat, and you show up sort of as a mutual peer with the value add, that's great too. The worst thing you can do is show up with that me mindset. And so the second thing I'll say is that all of these, if you think about anybody who's crazy successful, anybody from Sarah Blakely to Elon Musk to Elizabeth Warren. And the reason I mention that is because, politics aside, my wife and I were watching Ballers, the show with the Rock, Dwayne Johnson, and Dwayne Johnson and Elizabeth Warren tweet back and forth all the time. And we just saw like Cardi B just did an interview with Bernie Sanders, and like these celebrities and these powerful, successful people, they all connect with each other on mutual respect and value. Nobody's coming to the other one saying like, please help me, please help me. That's not how they connect. But also they all didn't build their networks were created. They weren't born into the world with them. It's not like Bill Gates was born with the full network of people he has now. He had to build that network. And the way that he did that was, one, by reaching out to people and saying, hey, I want to learn more about what you're doing. Maybe I can help. And then also he just started creating value on his own. And that's something that everybody listening can do. And I think that there are other speakers that are a part of this summit that will show them how to do that. But Chris Rock, the comedian, has a great quote. He said, when he was getting started and he was traveling from gig to gig, his car would break down. And sometimes he'd stand on the side of the highway with his hand up and nobody would stop. People would keep going by. As soon as he got back there and he started pushing his own car, people started stopping and getting out and pushing the car with him. And he said, people like to help you when they already see that you're helping yourself. And that's so true with job searching, with starting a business, because what happens is a lot of people show up for advice and they ask for advice. And then, the person giving the advice never hears from the other person again. But if you can show up and you can say, hey, I'm worth your time because I'm already taking these courses and investing in this knowledge, or I'm already building this business and I've gotten it up to this point, or, hey, I can do this for you. I had an idea for how I can help you or how you can help yourself. if you show up with those,
Mm-hmm.
that value, all of a sudden, your credibility goes up and you're going to get more responses.
Yeah.
So to kind of recap, I would say, one, no successful person has had their network from the very beginning. They've all built it and they've done it through cold outreach. And then the way that they've created those relationships is by being valuable, by asking about how they can, or figuring out how they can give before they ask for something in return.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's awesome. That's awesome. The other piece that stood out that was kind of aha-ish and a reminder is that most people, I can't say everybody, but most people like to feel like they're a thought leader, like to feel like their experience has value. People love to tell you what to do. Even if they don't know what they're talking about, they love to tell you what to do and how you should do it and what their opinion is and blah, 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 which is why when you go online, people can, especially anonymously, have all kinds of things to say, right? But when we think about mindset and how we have to reframe things, when you lead with admiration for what someone has done, and that admiration could simply have been they transitioned from A to B. Like they actually did that, did the same transition you're wanting to do and would love to hear how you did that. And so regular Joes who are working their jobs every day and they're taking care of their families and they're doing things in their own right. Sometimes you don't get that kind of admiration and whatnot just on a regular basis. And so the fact that something you've done is something that other people want to hear about is really a game changer. And I think we underestimate that. And when you can make someone feel really good about who they are and what value they have to add to you, sometimes the candy store is open. So that's a great reframe and thinking about why someone would open your email and say, yes, how can I help you? Right?
Exactly. Yep.
So something that you talk about a lot is, not having like the traditional experience, like not having the perfect experience for that job. And for folks who are looking to make a radical shift, whether it's into their, a different career or, whatever, they may lack the experience. Like the company wants all these 10 things, you might have 7 of those or 6 of those. And so you're not the A-list candidate, so to speak. How can people overcome that perceived deficiency so that they actually become someone that the marketplace really wants to bring on?
For sure. And there's a bit of a spectrum here. So I love that you mentioned the scale, because if you're a 6 or 7 out of 10, maybe for this new role that you want to take on, there's one approach. Whereas if you're kind of a 1 or 2 or 3, there's a bit of a different approach.
Okay, let's talk about it.
So we can start with the 1, 2, 3. So people who want to make a radically different career change, sort of like I did, coming from, a healthcare background in medicine to tech advertising sales, there's not a whole lot of transferable skills there. And so when that's the case, if this thing is totally different than what you're looking or what you want to do next, you really have to go out and kind of build some experience and some skills on your own before a company will take a shot at you. No company is taking a chance on somebody just because they feel like they can do the job, or they know they can do the job if someone gave them a chance. And the big reason for that is because hiring is a massive risk and it's a massive expense. So there's some research out there. I think the Bureau of Labor said that a bad hire can cost the company about 30% of the employees' first year earnings. I've also seen stats that say research that says it can cost the company up to 1 to 2% of their overall revenues. And I think people don't understand everything that goes into a bad hire, because not only do you have the person's salary, but you're paying, recruiters and firms to source candidates. You're taking hours of employees' time to sit down and interview those people and deliberate on who to choose. But then on top of that, when you hire somebody new, there's a ramp-up period. So they're not operating at 100% efficiency, and there's revenue loss, there's productivity loss there. And so, if you look at the average dollars per head at a company and you think about, okay, now we're taking 60% of that or 40% of that over a 6-month or however long the ramp-up period is, that's a huge expense. And so a company is not going to, on-the-job training doesn't happen a ton anymore. And that's a different story between, I wish more companies would be willing to invest in employees who showed the tenacity and the drive to be able to learn. But as of right now, the way the playing field is, they're just not going to take a chance on somebody with absolutely nothing to kind of point to in terms of experience. And so if you want that job, you have to go build those skills. Now, the best way to do that is basically take the same approach we just talked about, but aim it at people who have made a transition into the role you want from a non-traditional background. They'll be able to tell you what skills to learn, how to prioritize them, what gets you the most bang for your buck. They'll also be able to tell you what projects to work on, you know, how to actually build that real world experience. You know, for me, when I was making this transition, I came from a very, very different background. So I had to go build my own skills. So something I did was I went out and I basically taught myself digital marketing. I read all the books that I could. I took a bunch of courses, but then I took those skills and I went and I freelanced. So I went and found businesses who had less knowledge about digital marketing than I did. And I started for free. I said, hey, I'll manage your stuff for free. I'm just trying to gain experience. Then after I had a couple case studies, I went out and I started charging, and I started with $250 a month, then 500, then 750, and I kept ramping it up. And eventually I had a business with, you know, a couple of different clients, and this was a second source of income for me, which was great because I was basically getting paid to build that experience. And so that's something that you can do if you have, you know, zero experience whatsoever. Now, if you're closer to a 7 out of 10 on the scale, whether you're starting there or you were a 1 out or 2 out of 10 and you kind of worked your way to a 6 or a 7 through the stuff we just talked about, the next step is finding a way to convey your value that's easy to understand and makes sense to the company. So I like to call this a value validation project. And that's essentially a deliverable that allows you to sell yourself and your experience in your words in a medium you're comfortable with in whatever way you want. Because when we think about how people kind of pitch themselves for a job, you know, we use these things called resumes and cover letters right now, and they are just terrible indicators of how you would be as an employee for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, none of us write resumes on a daily basis. You know, we're not experts, and so the resumes have this language that's only used in resumes. It's not used anywhere else. And so when you're trying to convey yourself through this language that you've never used, it's really, really hard to get your point across. And then on top of that, the hiring managers, you know, they're not reading resumes every day either. They're doing their actual job. And so they're not the best at they're not the best at teasing out the details from what you're saying. And so you have two sides that both aren't using this language all the time, and they're using this language to communicate. There's bound to be a disconnect. But then on top of that, the resume, it's only focused on your past. It doesn't really give you a chance to show, hey, I've done research on your company. I know what you need. Here's how I fit in. So if we take a step outside of that and we say, okay, you know, if I could pitch myself any way, how would I do it? That's where the magic happens. So for me, I really like to do these just in PowerPoint slide decks. And you can go find templates. Canva.com has great templates. If you go to Google and you type in Envato, ENVATO presentation templates, you can download an amazing professionally designed PowerPoint template for like $5 or something. It's super cheap. But then you have this deck, and you can kind of go out and find a way in. And this comes out of the company research that you do, the conversations you have. If you're meeting with these people, you ask them, hey, what's your team's biggest challenge? You know, what's the big initiative you're driving over the next 6 to 12 months? And then conducting your own research too, going out and maybe surveying customers or going and looking at news articles that are being posted or what's being talked about on social about these companies. Ideas are gonna surface, and then you can bake that into a deck, and you can basically say, hey, I really want this job as a, let's say, marketing manager. You know, I may not have the most traditional background, but let me show you what I bring to the table. Here are some ideas. You know, here's a competitive analysis of the landscape, and here's where the gaps are. And here are 3 ideas to help you shore up those gaps and get more customers, more consumers, more traffic. And these are just 3 ideas that I bring to the table. So, you know, if you hire me, there's plenty more where that came from. So to give a quick example, I was coaching somebody who she wanted a job in Microsoft, and she was going through this she was going for a rotational marketing program. And so we went out and we brainstormed. We said, okay, what product could use some marketing magic at Microsoft? And we just launched this product called Teams, which is essentially a Slack competitor. And Slack has dominated that market, right? Everybody uses them. They're pretty ubiquitous. So how do we come in and gain market share? So we did a little research, and we found an article that basically said, it was written by The Verge, which is a reputable publication. And it said, hey, Slack's issue is getting people to pay for its service. Microsoft's issue is getting people to actually love using Teams. And so we latched onto that, and we put it in a deck, and we came up with 3 ways that Microsoft could potentially leverage to increase Teams usership. So we did stuff like, hey, if you've ever tried to send a PowerPoint deck that was too large, it's a huge pain to figure out how to send it. Why don't we send it through Teams? We went and she actually screenshotted reviews from the mobile app store that said, hey, the mobile app is terrible for these specific reasons. Let's fix them. And she kind of showcased that. And so she found real ways to say, hey, your customers have an issue. Here's the problem we have. Here are some solutions that I bring to the table. And then she went and she sent that off to a whole bunch of people who she found through the same process we mentioned earlier. And she ended up getting the interview. She ended up getting the offer. And the reason is because she had a great resume and she had great experience, but so do a million other people who are applying to Microsoft. But what set her apart was taking that extra, so sort of being a little more ambitious, taking the extra step and putting together that deck that said, hey, here's me showing you I've done a ton of research on your company. I know the products. I know where the shortcomings are. I know what your goals are. Here's how I directly plug into that. Here are some ideas I have. And it's a no-brainer when there's 10 people sitting on the decision table and 9 of them have the resume and the cover letter, and then the 10th has both of those, but then they have this extra thing that shows they went above and beyond. And so that will allow you to not only go above and beyond and show them that, but it will also allow you to convey your experience in your words, which is really, really important, because none of us sell ourselves using the words in a resume or what we write in an online app. We sell ourselves in very different language. So giving yourself that opportunity is so huge.
No, I think that's critical. And I know that we're wrapping up with time, and I want one clarification.
Sure.
When you're reaching out to folks, oftentimes you don't know, you just know, hey, I want to work with this company. I want to do this type of work. You don't know that there's a role coming down the pike or not. You don't necessarily know what's been posted, because oftentimes by the time it's posted, it might be a little bit late for you to get into the referral camp, right? If you're starting from scratch. So when you're going through this process, are you simply going and trying to connect with folks who might be in the area that you're interested in, with the hope that there's going to be some intersection of an opportunity coming down the pipe? Or even a creation of an opportunity for you? Like, is that really kind of the mindset that you're going in, or are you going in because you know that there is this particular role that is hot and available?
It's a bit of both. So we definitely want to go after roles that we know are open right now. And this process, it doesn't take as long as you think. So the people that I coach, the average time to first interview, which is kind of the easiest metric that we can use, is roughly about 7 weeks or so. And so even roles that have been posted, sometimes they take a very long time to fill. We just had a role on our team that was sitting open for, I think, 6 or 7 months or something. And so, don't just automatically assume that you're out of the running just because the role is already posted. But at the same time, if there's a company or a team that you would kill to work for, great companies, great teams, they're always hiring, they're always expanding. And so sort of like we talked about before, these roles get announced internally and they're not posted online. So for me, I stepped into a new role at Microsoft, and that role was announced at the end of October last year in 2018. And it wasn't posted online until mid-December. So there was a month and a half where people like me who are employees here are interviewing for it, because we know it's up. Our VP announced it, and we're referring other people into it. And by the time it gets to the online posting, that person probably has a good idea of who they want. So again, not to say that you should rule yourself out just because something's posted online, but if you really, really want a role, the way that you're going to get in early ahead of anybody else is building those relationships proactively. So you sort of have to balance, like, what are those immediate opportunities that I want to go after versus what am I willing to make more of a longer term investment in? And I think if you, across your 100 to 150 people, I think if you do a bit of a mix there, you'll be in really good shape.
Perfect. What happens if time is of the essence? Would you do anything different in your strategy? Again, like if I'm working at company A and I just want to make a move, I've got weeks, months, up until a year to kind of do this process with ease and work my way through. If I've been laid off, transitioned, or just in the place where I need work like yesterday, would I approach this process any differently?
For sure. I think so. I would do 2 things. One, I would sort of, if you need work ASAP, I would lift the restrictions on the 10 to 15 companies, and I would maybe cast a wider net.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, the biggest lever that we have in this whole process is the number of people that you reach out to, because the more stuff that we shove into the top of the funnel, that it has a trickle down effect, and the more results you're going to get at the bottom of the funnel. And
Mhm.
so I would, instead of reaching out to 3 to 5 people every day, I'd be reaching out to 20 people every day. And I would just be cranking out emails, because the more emails you send, the better chance you have of connecting with people. And
Mhm.
there's a range of people that you connect with. Some people will take a few conversations before they're willing to refer you in. Other people will say, hey, this was great. If I can do anything to help or pass your resume along, like send it over. And you'll get that after the first call.
Yeah.
And so the more people that you talk to, the more opportunities are going to surface, the more people you're going to find that are going to be willing to help you immediately, and the faster this whole thing is going to go. So if you need work ASAP, I would kind of relax the standards on the companies. Yeah. And I would just crank out emails.
Yeah, perfect. This has been awesome, Austin. And I appreciate just the specificity that you've provided. Literally, it's been golden from Envato and Canva and software packages and what to do and what to say. Like, honestly, if folks just re-listen to this and take notes and do and execute just from this conversation, their circumstances can look very different. So I appreciate the spirit of generosity there. And I know that generosity continues because you are offering a free gift for those who are listening in on this conversation and want to benefit even more from your strategies and the content that you have to offer. So I'm going to kind of leave that platform to you to share what people are able to get access to.
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the things that was frustrating to me as a job seeker was the lack of kind of tools to help me out. So a big initiative for me is to create free tools for job seekers to help them get jobs. So we mentioned a couple. I made mailscoop.io to kind of help people find email addresses. I'm coming up with another tool soon, but right now, the other best thing is we created a free resume builder. So if you go to cultivatedculture.com/resume, it will take you to a builder. All the templates are applicant tracking system friendly, so they can be scanned by the ATS systems. I had them reviewed and approved by recruiters at Google and Microsoft and a bunch of these other companies.
Yeah.
And it kind of teaches you as you go, and it's totally free. You'll never see a subscription plan or a fee or a limit. You can create and download as many as you want. So definitely check it out, cultivatedculture.com/resume. And I hope between that and everything else, this was helpful. And then finally, everything we just talked about, I laid out in an article. If you go to my blog, it's the first article at the top, how to get a job anywhere with no connections. It has the scripts that you can copy paste. It has links to all the tools. It has the whole deal step by step. So if people are, if they want to take their time going through it and have it in front of them, that's the best way to kind of go through that.
No, awesome. And I've read that article, and literally, folks, just go copy, paste, wash, rinse, repeat.
Yep.
And
exactly.
I'm big on swipe files, and I'm big on scripting, because words matter. And when someone has figured out how to say something and say it in a way that gets a result, you just use that. Insert your name where his name is, and you just use
Press
it.
send. Yep.
Oh, that's the way to do it. And so again, Austin, it's been my pleasure to connect with you. I've learned a ton on this call as well. But I appreciate you being willing to share that with the world. I think it's a huge blessing for folks who've been able to learn from you. So thank you. And to everyone that's listening in, we're excited to have you, and hope that this has been so well worth your time, more than worth your time, but to your success and happiness. And we will chat with you soon. Bye.
Thanks so much, Renessa. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.